am sick of people saying that Disney has an adorkable problem. Because the truth is that Disney recycling the same personality formula of awkward, clumsy, quirky, and high energy for their new heroines is a band-aid on top of the true problem with the princesses, but nobody talks about it. And because Adorkable seems like the obvious culprit, we have missed how the actual problem is ruining not just the characters, but the movies as a whole in 3 huge ways. And to best showcase what the true culprit is and everything else I've discovered, I'm gonna compare Disney's 4 horsemen of the movie musical apocalypse to K-pop Demon Hunters. Even though I've been feeling this way about the princesses for years now, and I have been immeasurably disappointed in Disney's musicals as a whole, especially as a musical theater performer and songwriter, it's K-pop Demon Hunters and Rumi that helped me find a missing piece of this protagonist puzzle. So by the end of this video, you'll understand why this is bigger than just a few cringy character moments. This eats away at the very fabric of the movie and sabotages everything. And because of that, Disney cannot follow through on what legendary animators who worked with Walt tried to spell out for modern Disney about what every film needs at a basic, foundational level. If you feel like that magic is gone, it isn't just you or growing up or, oh, well, the movies were always for kids anyway, because that's not even true. And that gives Disney an easy out, an easy excuse to justify their bad writing. We don't need any of that. There are concrete reasons why this is happening. And this is Calxiyn here to tell you what they are and make you care. And thank you to all the patrons and the YouTube members who support me so I can show you that it is that deep. And for everybody who bought my merch when I launched it a couple weeks ago, thank you guys so much. All of you look so cute. If you bought any, send me a picture and I'll feature it in the next video, but let's just get into it. This deeper issue with the princesses starts with a failure to execute a key fundamental of Disney storytelling. For people like us that don't have access to the Disney archives, this information can only be found in a book that isn't even published anymore, and I hunted it down so you guys can learn from it too. The Disney Villain Bible isn't just about villains at all. It can't be, because the relationship with the villain and the hero is narratively symbiotic. And so to explain why Disney's problem isn't adorkable, we must examine both sides of this dynamic. So let's talk about villains first, quoting from the book. The villain acts, the hero reacts. The villain is the key to your movie, and you have to have everyone else rise to that same level. There must be a worthy adversary or you have no picture. If a story does not make convincing use of the villains, there is no real menace and there is no heart. A weak villain seldom calls for the creation of a first-class hero. If the villain is never wicked enough, the princess will never have the opportunity to show her courage or her bravery, and the audience will never feel that tension or danger, and the situations where she ends up winning will feel unearned. And something I found interesting is that they say, despite the personified villains having very different motivations or methodologies, what they have in common is that they feel like they are the victims of grave injustices. They are the ones who deserve the happy ending. And that because of this, they have a need to control the destinies of others. And this should also extend to the antagonistic forces, which we also see in many old Disney movies. Even if they have gotten what they wanted and the hero is no longer a threat, that is not enough. They must also ruin the lives of the meddling little fools who dare to get in their way in the first place. And if you didn't know any of that, you should subscribe. But Magnifico, the live-action evil queen imposter, and the antagonistic forces in movies like Frozen 2 or Moana 2 do not ever reach the necessary level of wickedness in personality, behavior, or action in the same way that Guima or the demons do. And this causes a lack of menace or darkness in these films. Guima and the demons inherently cause interference in the destinies or happy ending for Huntrix's fans by cutting their lives short. And they also do the same for Zoe, Mira, Rumi, and Jinyu in ways we'll talk about in our hero section next. But the darkness is built not only in dialogue or in the brainwashing of the fans or in songs like Your Idol, the audience is also immersed in the darkness in a sensory way. It's built in the design of the demons and Guima and the underworld, this purple fire that wants to keep engulfing and destroying. But it also infects the overworld, changing the lighting, the atmosphere, the Moon, and Rumi herself. It's not enough to just have darkness in these stories. The beauty and the light in this world, such as the act of creating music in of itself, needs to be corrupted by the darkness and cause pain and suffering. It's not just Magnifico gives Asha's mom magical heartburn by crushing her wish, where we as the audience expect more severe consequences but instead get the least dramatic, least compelling option possible. There is this cold, senseless death of these ordinary people, and we also get a glimpse of the eternal torment that awaits through Jinyu, how Guima wears him down and feeds into Jinyu's self-loathing. Because of this real danger that, in comparison, modern Disney is shying away from, Huntrix can rise to the occasion and be first-class heroes. But this isn't as simple as K-Pop Demon Hunters has good villains. Disney doesn't anymore. Case closed. We still have to talk about the princesses. Because it's not the villains that are mandatory, rather, it's the darkness that they cultivate that is. Having a personified villain to do all the heavy lifting may be easier, but it's not impossible to do this through an antagonistic force. It's not enough to say the villains don't do the darkness. We have to ask why not? Especially when, for Magnifico, we have seen all of the opportunities that were handed to them on a silver platter. It should have been so easy, but why are they shying away from having true menace? Why and how are they failing and making convincing use of the villains or these forces? Understanding the villain's role in this dynamic is the foundation we needed to explore the true princess problem. Because the Disney Villain Bible would say that for a villain to succeed, you must have a victim. If there is no villainy, there is no victim. If there is no victim, there is no villainy, only threatening potential. And making victims out of the fans is not enough, and K-Pop Demon Hunters understood this. In the villain/victim dynamic, the heroes must be the victims. And a good villain or antagonistic force will not just create this darkness externally or run interference on the hero's destiny. What they will do is make the victim doubt themselves and sabotage their own destiny. They will bring to the surface the dark or negative feelings which were already bubbling in the victim. K-Pop Demon Hunters could not function if Zoe, Mira, Jinyu, and Rumi were not victims. Because in the Villain Bible, amongst other things that we will talk about, they say that the protagonist must appeal to the audience's basic sense of unfairness. To make the audience cry, that is so unfair! They must be a victim of something, and that makes us feel more protective or angry on the character's behalf, because the victim feeling sadness, anger, guilt, anxiety, or shame, blaming themselves for their failures, despite the fact that we can see that the villain is orchestrating their breaking point, heightens that basic sense of unfairness. It's not about making a character relatable, it's about creating a connection that goes deeper than even empathy. And this is how K-Pop Demon Hunters ended up helping me crack what Disney's true princess problem is, because for the longest time, I always thought that I just didn't like Save the World/Kingdom stories for my fairy tale movie musicals. Fantasy novels or video games or anime with these "you are the chosen one and you must save the world" type plots provide a power fantasy that is fundamentally different from a fairy tale, and so I felt like these plots were inherently un-Disney and were making the fairy tale characters worse. Fairy tales were created by the common folk for the common folk, where the underdog uses their wit, quick thinking, or moral virtue to succeed. And these are things we are all supposed to be able to emulate. If a fairy tale character is confronted by a villain, it's the resident wolf in the woods or their own stepmother. Sending your children into a forest to be eaten by a witch is more heinous when it's that specific, and it's set in at least what was once upon a time, or what could have been, the peasant's own backyard, compared to something abstract like a world-ending calamity. It's a common misconception about fairy tales that the protagonist just waits around for a magical being to show up and get them out of that situation, when in reality, their actions are building towards why they are worthy of receiving their happily ever after. Compare this to a lot of anime where you just need to be a little pathetic enough to be chosen by God and suddenly get superpowers. This is wish fulfillment in its own way, but it's not a fairy tale anymore. But K-Pop Demon Hunters made me realize that it's not me, and it's also not Save the World either. I blamed giving every new Disney princess a Save the World quest for the characters turning into these shallow puppets who repeat, "We saved the world because it's good and we're nice, ooh woo." But I realize now, because of K-Pop Demon Hunters, and particularly because of Snow White just releasing, and how that should have had the personal plot locked the fuck in alongside the Save the Kingdom one, that it's not the plot. It's because there is no victim. In fact, I have to wonder if Disney is choosing these plots to avoid deeper emotion, not the other way around. By opting for these pathetic villains or having none at all, they never have to risk the leading ladies being victims of heartbreak, sorrow, grief, pain, or any true suffering. And this is seen most obviously in the live-action remakes. Think about how in Beauty and the Beast, for example, there's this joke about, oh, Belle is probably scared half to death, and the punchline is supposed to be, oh no, she's fine, she's trying to escape. In this video, I discuss why this is so terrible for Belle's character and the emotional impact of her sacrifice, but it's also terrible to the audience in a whole new way. In the animated version, we feel for Belle because her situation seems truly hopeless, and it's worth mourning with her not even being able to say goodbye to her father. There are high stakes in that. But then in the live-action version, it's like, oh well, it was never that serious. She always planned to break her promise and escape. So the separation from her father in Belle's mind is no longer life or death. It is no longer forever. It is just for 30 minutes until she can get out of the castle and walk back to town, I guess. Victim erosion has happened to Jasmine and Ariel as well to a lesser extent, but the supernatural Mary Sue Mulan is the most egregious example by far. I don't even have to explain why to you guys. But do think about everything that was lost from Mulan in terms of how the antagonistic forces push her, because it's not just that she's a victim of society, it's how the forces force her to confront what she thinks and feels about herself. But this cannot be done if there is no darkness, or the character never feels like they are in that danger. This is why I say that Disney does not have an Adorkable problem, but rather a victim problem. I don't think Disney wants the leading ladies to be victims, and because of that, there is no external darkness, but there's also no darkness for them to confront in themselves either. Though characters like Cinderella or Snow White may not change as much as, say, the Beast, darkness is still a revealing force, and that's where a sense of progress comes from for us as the audience. The more that's revealed about these characters, whether it's their hope or their pain, the more we fall in love. But that's too vulnerable, too exposing for modern Disney. But let's bring it back to the new musicals, because Disney sort of knows that they have to deliver that sense of progress somehow, but if not through the princesses, what are they going to do? Their solution ever since The Princess and the Frog has been, 1, offload the burden of the character development, change, even just a regular reveal and everything that entails darkness-wise. Flaws, ugliness, insecurities, mistakes, negative emotions, what have you, onto a secondary character who is usually a man. Think about how Naveen is a victim of Facilier, not Tiana, despite the fact that this snowballs into Tiana being a side character in her own story. Once that is taken care of, step 2 is to give the leading ladies an extremely shallow conflict or flaw to overcome so we can have the illusion that princesses have real character development now, not like those other princesses of the past who would just sit around and cry, even though the reality is that's not even true, and these types of characters actually feel less and less human. And even though I hate the idea of shoving all the emotional baggage onto a man, the reason why Snow White and Wish are so uniquely awful, I think, is because they don't have a duo partner to express the relevant, messy human emotions, and so no one does. And really, even with the duo partner, nothing changes about the fact that the narrative is begging for the main princess characters to be radically changed by the journey. But because they can never commit to this messy, drastic before, there can't be an after like there is for Rumi and K-Pop Demon Hunters. Instead of having characters that persevere after being beaten down, they'd rather have these characters never be beaten down in the first place, because that would be perceived as weak. You're not a strong female character if something bad happens to you and you overcome it, I guess. It's better for nothing bad to have ever happened in the first place. The most these characters get in terms of a flaw or conflict is the princess did nothing wrong. Even if you saw it with your own two eyes, no she didn't. They were basically perfect the whole time. Everyone else needed to learn to believe in Princess. Princess was just clumsy and awkward and needed to be more confident. And the reason why this is also grating and tiresome as an audience member is because we can feel that Disney is writing from a defensive position literally all the time. This can not only be seen in the princesses, but their insistence on obnoxiously making fun of themselves, constantly apologizing for being a princess movie, a fairy tale movie, a musical, or everything all at once. It's like they are begging for the audience not to leave, and it's not just distracting or annoying, it undercuts the whimsy of Disney. And it takes the gravity and seriousness and stakes out of what should be impactful, emotional moments because they have to make sure, oh, don't worry, the princess isn't a victim. We're in the modern age now, we can't have any of that. Even for a second, our girl boss cannot feel hopelessness or sorrow. They must have everything figured out and be eternally optimistic. And this means, like the book said, there is no heart because there is no menace. And this is why even though the Adorkable criticism is true, it's not the cause, it's a symptom. And I think it's shallow to suggest that it's the cause. Because if you actually look back and go through the movies that have the biggest problems, Adorkable isn't the trend. It's this victim erosion that has been. Tiana wasn't Adorkable, she worked too hard. Moana wasn't Adorkable until they made her a parody of herself in Moana 2. But if you think about the first Moana, even though I do think that it is better than stuff like Wish, Maui is the one with the major baggage. He's the one who needs to learn the lesson and fix his mistakes. And we'll talk more about this later, but on the topic of Moana, I actually watched it last year for a video, and so I am not blinded by nostalgia, and I feel like that it is worse than people think it actually is. I think that the songs kind of cover it up, but watching the movie, I could not understand why it was so highly praised as being some sort of return to form, because it's not. I was expecting something like Mulan, where Moana has to learn and grow and overcome these challenges and her own self-doubt and all of that sort of stuff, and I got that until Maui got here, and then it became all about him and basically Moana being a delivery girl to transfer both Maui and also the heart to a magical creature. And then it wasn't really personal anymore. All of that to say, it just so happens that Adorkable is the easiest way to give a princess a surface-level flaw to overcome without it being some big, moral failing, and to keep them fun and positive, because we wouldn't want them to have a messy human emotion. And of course I have my theories about why this is happening, but for today, the motivation doesn't really matter. Because they could have the best philosophy or intentions for doing this, or the worst. It's not gonna change that it's not working. The refusal to ever have the princesses be true victims ends up ruining the movies in 3 key ways. And I think by bringing this to the surface, we'll actually get somewhere. Firstly, the reluctance to create victims shows a fundamental misunderstanding of fairy tales. As soon as Disney themselves bought into the idea that fairy tales only have victims if they are damsels in distress, when they have had male victims before like Hercules, Aladdin, Quasimodo, even Philip in Cinderella's princes are, we were going to lose the fight for media literacy because Disney is saying, oh, all of those bad and borderline illiterate takes that people had on the internet, they were right actually, and now they are parroting this through shoehorn dialogue. Victims in this dynamic are not women with victimhood mentalities who wallow and blame others for their own misfortune. The Disney Villain Bible says that they are people who are oppressed by the villains. Villains, which are supposed to represent people with power that abuse it, whether it's the giant being a metaphor for a greedy king hoarding all the wealth while the peasants starve, or a wicked witch who should be a loving and caring mother using their position in the household to abuse a child. To sweep this under the rug means to minimize or ignore entirely why and how the character is oppressed. And when a company does not understand this, they will create shallow, soulless, corporate stories that insult the very idea of fairy tales while masquerading as one. In fairy tales, the villains are the ones with all this power, all while not being beholden to a moral code like the good characters are. And the victims are the underdogs with nothing but their wit, determination, quick thinking, strong relationships, or moral virtue, which are things that the common folk can emulate. When you remove how the character is oppressed, how they are a victim, it also means you remove the tools that the common folk have to fight back. And that's what's really ironic about all of this. Characters like Asha or the new Snow White are not more empowering in our modern age. They are less because they lack the heart, the vulnerability that we, the peasant folk, are supposed to have in common with them. It is bordering on dehumanizing that the leading lady can't be a messy, complicated human being, that she cannot be a victim in any capacity, that she can't have her own desires if they don't serve others, because that's too selfish. To be a girl boss, she has to be a good role model for children at all times. Their flaws and fears must literally never be seen. We cannot emulate being the chosen one, and even the most horribly written anime power fantasies at least do us the courtesy of making the protagonist a victim of something first. And it is very difficult for us, if not impossible, to feel that deeper connection when all you have is a hero who wants to save the world, not a victim who is trying to end the suffering not only of everybody around them, but their own personal suffering. And this leads me into the second way that this is ruining the films. A lack of victim robs the audience of our ability to care. And KPop Demon Hunters did exactly what the Disney Villain Bible says. Quote, "The audience must understand the victim's problems, cheer for their efforts, and enjoy their successes. If the victim is a sympathetic and appealing character, the audience becomes more involved. As the villain becomes more overpowering, the victim struggles frantically, searching for a major response in order to save themselves. It is what the villain forces others in the cast to do that will make a story memorable rather than merely ordinary. Such attacks compel the heroes to be more heroic than most people will have a chance to be in their whole lifetime. This captures the audience with hopes for their success, intense involvement in the outcome, and sympathy for the pain endured. We do not want to see someone solve someone else's problems. You cannot capture the audience for a fairy tale without them being the victim with problems to overcome and having pain to endure. And this is where we're getting into the meat of our comparison here with Demon Hunters, but let me know if you would like a dedicated video about the victim/villain dynamic thing and how that fails. Kind of like a reverse of what Better with Bob did, like he did the in defense of the Disney princesses. I will not be defending them. I will be ripping things apart scene by scene. But for now, let's keep things brief. Magnifico never does anything wicked enough for us to sympathize with Asha for the pain endured. There was no pain, literally nothing happened. For example, I thought on my first watch that the big secret was gonna be that Magnifico has no real magic. He uses alchemy, and he basically transmutes or combines people's wishes together for the power to grant more superficial ones. I thought that this is why people would be forgetful or vacant, as Asha alludes to, that their wishes have been melted into someone else's heart, so to speak. And I was sure that Magnifico was going to crush the wishes of possible rebels in order to kill them. Because they planted the seed of Asha's father studying the stars, presumably something that is more natural magic, the king knowing him, and the father dying. I was waiting the entire time for the payoff of, oh, Magnifico killed Asha's father because he found out the truth, and we didn't get any of that! It still pisses me off because imagine how different this wish would be if it happened right after Asha comes home and her grandfather is sick and dying. The same sickness she remembers her father having, because Magnifico's punishment for Asha's insolence is the death of someone that she loves. A clear message, don't fuck with me again. But because Wish gutted its own themes and sanded Magnifico down, he isn't evil enough, so Asha can't be heroic enough, or at all, which means to a lot of people, Asha comes off as selfish or unreasonable, and that is beyond just bland. We can't get invested in her story because it's not her story. It's not her pain, it's not her suffering. It's her deciding to solve everyone else's problems without us understanding what her problem is. And on a basic level, she ruins the villain/victim dynamic because she acts first, without Magnifico doing something truly heinous. Remember, the villain acts, the hero reacts. And since Star does 90% of the work anyway, she doesn't feel heroic like Mulan or even Cinderella do. It is a very common misconception that Cinderella just waited around and then, oh, she got help from the mice, the fairy godmother, when the entire point of this is that Cinderella saves the mice from the mousetrap. And so later, when she is trapped, they repay her for her previous kindness. That is the sort of thing that we're talking about when we say that the hero needs to do something from their wit, quick thinking, moral virtue, whatever, that is later then rewarded by fate. Even though the evil queen imposter technically does evil because they have the benefit of the original Snow White plotline, she is just not believably wicked to the audience, especially with her ridiculous musical number, which hopefully I'll be making a video about soon, so subscribe. You would think that Disney could not mess up its most menacing plot beat of having the evil queen send someone to murder a child, but the half-hearted attempt at villainy means that the attempts to be heroic by Snow White are also half-hearted. Snow White isn't naive enough in this version to be blind to the evil queen being this obviously and cartoonishly evil, which ironically makes our girl boss Snow White seem incompetent and passive. If you do not answer the question of why does it have to be now, like the movies do for, say, Rapunzel, Quasimodo, Ariel, the audience will get annoyed, but we can excuse the previous passivity if at the end of, I don't know, say, Waiting on a Wish, Snow White has a turning point moment that after years and years and years, she finally feels like she is old enough to rule and to do something about her stepmother, whatever, it doesn't matter. But instead, the song ends with a shrug and her saying, I guess I'll keep waiting on that wish, but imagine if Quasimodo's song ended that way. It is ridiculous, and any musical theater lyricist will caution you against purely pitiful characters who do nothing to change their circumstances, or don't even try, because a compelling victim has to fight back like the villain Bible described. They have to at least make an attempt. But by having Snow White refuse to see herself as a victim of the evil queen, she actually becomes a lifeless character that we feel no sympathy for. On top of that, Jonathan has an entire song reducing everything that Snow White has gone through as princess problems, and she never defends herself. Again, she never fights back. She never expresses how wrong Jonathan is in the unfairness of her stepmother trying to kill her. The basic unfairness that every Disney movie needs. And she never talks about the emotional toll of having to deal with that when she has no other family when her dad is gone. The movie actually agrees with Jonathan. Snow White is not a victim, and we shouldn't care about her princess problems, so we don't. I don't know what they thought would happen when they looked into the camera and told the audience everything that has happened so far, it doesn't matter, she's just whining. Okay, I believe you then. And now I don't give a fuck. In Moana 2, Moana isn't a character with a story, she's just an NPC who does things TM. She isn't allowed to have messy feelings, and so she just resigns herself with a shrug to her destiny. She never has any sort of resentment or anger about being the one who has to save the world again, and how unfair that is. And despite her parents saying that she may die and never come back, the journey isn't really any more dangerous than the first movie, and the focus is more about how Moana's little sister feels about everything, compared to Moana having any fear surrounding her own death. And I don't think this is too dark for Disney, not just because of Disney's own history, but we see this trope in kid stuff all the time. Oh, you have the hero who's distancing themselves from the crew to avoid hurting them because they think that something is gonna happen to them, that they're gonna die and they don't want their friends to be sad. I would take that cliche of having to learn to lean on other people around you compared to what we actually got, which was just nothing. Or like I say in this video, they could have had Moana feeling pressured to be a good role model for her little sister, and her and Maui maybe unpacking how they feel like failures to their families. I feel like we could have gotten more than that, considering in the first movie all they do is go, oh, Maui's just like me for real, and they never bring it up again. But just like how in the first movie, Moana is just a glorified delivery girl, her job is now to babysit a bunch of annoying side characters, and they get to learn the lesson of working as a team or to stop being grumpy or whatever the fuck. There is no lesson, no pain, no moral failing to overcome for our perfect Moana. And of course, what do we get? A song from Maui saying that Moana is perfect and she just needs to believe in herself. And it is all the more meaningless when you can see the clear conflict that the narrative is crying out to actually address, and they don't address it. And here's what really kills me, okay? If Disney has truly bought into this ridiculous idea that girls like me grew up waiting around for a fairy godmother or for a man to save them, shouldn't they be more concerned about young girls believing it is their job to fix everything with a smile and without wanting anything for themselves beyond being of service to others? To babysit and wrangle selfish men into taking responsibility for their actions. That you shouldn't marry a man you just met because that's ridiculous. Who you should marry is the man who belittles the emotional and physical abuse that you have gone through as princess problems. That these women who had their own personal desires and motivations and actually pursued what they wanted are not girl boss enough. But the woman who wants nothing more than to fulfill the legacy of a man is. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm sure by now someone has been furiously typing a comment about Elsa, but here's the thing. She was the imperfect character in Frozen 1, but Disney was only willing to do that because Anna was supposed to be the perfect princess for the brand. Anna is energetic, caring, positive, kind, and the flaws that she does have are just secret weapons in the narrative, or they are convenient for Disney. She doesn't think before she acts, but she's overwhelmed with love and concern. That's her superpower. That's why she can chase after and save Elsa, so that's fine. Anna is naive and a little too eager to trust, but don't worry, we are really gonna unpack how years of loneliness, grief, and rejection by the one person in the world that you have left and is supposed to love you impacts a person. We're just going to berate Anna for being that way the entire time, and make sure that the audience knows that this is new Disney, not old Disney. She's going to learn that you can't marry a man you just met, not like the other princesses. And we see the sanding down of both of them, but particularly of Anna, in songs like More Than Just the Spare and Life's Too Short, which I talk about in this video. In these songs, the pain and resentment that Anna felt is actually explored instead of just being glossed over. And they were cut. If you didn't know, there's actually a very consistent word on the street, if you will, from people that worked at the parks at the time and people that worked in actual, corporate positions, okay? That Anna had a disproportionate amount of merch compared to Elsa for this reason. That because Disney had made Anna the good one, little girls would want to be her, not Elsa, and therefore Anna needed more product. And then when the movie actually came out with every little girl singing Let It Go, they were not prepared on any level. And I bring this up so we can contrast the type of character that Elsa is in Frozen 2, where now, because she is the marketable one, her impulsive and self-destructive behavior is not a flaw that Elsa needs to learn from, because we can't have that. We can't have her acknowledging that she's hurting the people that she loves and trying to change. That is just who she is. It's Anna who gets to sing about her grief and despair, which usually I would find refreshing, but it doesn't work for me when I can see so transparently now what they are doing. I think that Disney thinks that they have found this loophole, that parents will only see a character as a bad role model if the characters admit their mistakes and reflect on their behavior. So long as nothing that bad happens and there are no consequences and the story doesn't treat it as a problem, it's not a problem, it's a superpower. It is a good thing that Elsa abandons her only family to live in the woods. Anna just needs to suck it up and get on board. She's not being a very good supportive sister right now. This is not the way to create a compelling story. In K-Pop Demon Hunters, the fact that Rumi is a victim who goes through these intense negative emotions, so much so that it rips the whole moon apart, that it has a consequence, is what made the movie resonate with so many people. What is so compelling about Rumi is that the darkness that she struggles with is directly intertwined with the villain's oppression, and it makes overcoming the obstacles and saving the world even harder. It's not just saving the world is so hard with a dash of sadness but mostly toxic positivity. Instead, it's saving the world shouldn't be this hard. It's hard because I'm broken, because I'm a failure, because I'm not good enough. I'm ruining everything. And she gets more frustrated, more afraid, and more desperate because she sees it as her fault. The things that make Rumi a victim are directly intertwined with her shame and how this darkness and self-loathing impacts her identity, her relationships, and her emotions. I think that Hadestown actually said it better than I can. It's the dogs that howl inside your head. We don't just feel sympathy for Rumi, we see ourselves in her, the same way that previous generations did with Ariel or Quasimodo. We understand the depths of that pain and darkness, but she fights back. She is clever, combative, and unbending anyway. Rumi's rage, her fear, her insecurities are fueled by Guima and the Save the World plot. But if Guima were a thoughtless force of nature, Rumi's flaws, her shame, would still be oppression by the antagonistic force. We don't really care that the world is saved and the Hamun is changed. What we care about is seeing Rumi grow into the person who could change it. It's our intense involvement in the outcome of her story, not just the story of the world ending, that makes her triumph so satisfying in ways that Wish and Moana 2 just can't be. It becomes a personal triumph, where saving the world is an extension of Rumi saving herself. And I think that Disney's Save the World stories will keep failing if they refuse to intertwine these elements together. And Disney can't do that if they refuse to have the princesses be victims. But if you can believe it, we're not done. This has more disastrous consequences than what we have already discussed. We need to talk about the third way that this ruins the films and how it deprives everything, plot, setting, character, music, you name it, of the most important thing that every Disney film needs in order to succeed. And before I reveal it, I just want to thank my patrons and my YouTube members again for their support. I also want to plug myself and tell you that even though pledging on Patreon or through the YouTube membership thing is the best way to support the channel, I also have cute merch now, like I talked about at the beginning of the video, and here are some pictures directly by satisfied Calxiyn customers. Hopefully I'll get a gig soon and I'll actually be able to buy some for myself. Let's get back to the video. The key to what every Disney movie needs in order to succeed, and why this problem goes even deeper than just the princesses, is actually connected to something I mentioned earlier. Remember my whole what message is Disney sending to young girls crash out if they're expected to fix everything with a smile without wanting anything for themselves beyond just being at the service of others and being good for goodness sake? It isn't just that our new princesses are without flaws. By preventing them of being victims of any sort of pain or hardship, Disney accidentally made princesses who cannot dream. It's not just about the past princesses or Rumi being victims. It's that darkness facilitates insight into their deeper needs. It's not just that Rumi needs to save the world. It's that she thinks through saving the world, she will finally have her freedom. Contrast this to Asha, who is written very defensively, particularly in this scene, but also all the time. What's ironic is that they wouldn't have to shoehorn this line in about, oh, Asha's not making a wish in like a selfish way. If they had made Asha a victim, there would be no question of whether she's selfish or not. But the reason why this wish ends up being so vague is because Asha cannot dream or imagine anything on a personal level. She doesn't know what a happily ever after is or feels like because she's not living in a nightmare. And this goes back to the victim/villain dynamic. When New Disney makes these decisions, we aren't just deprived of darkness, we are deprived of the victim's warmth. The Villain Bible quoted another writer here. We need terror by which to measure and enjoy our comfort. We need thrill to ameliorate the tedium. We need evil to locate our good. And evil is a concept that has been increasingly undervalued and ignored. And I would add to that, and they did too, that it's more than just comfort. It is the threat of the nightmare that makes us fight even harder for our dreams. What endears us to the oppressed victim is their ability to dream and have hope despite their current painful reality. They aren't just kind of excited to go on an adventure or leave their life behind or play hero. They have these holes in their hearts that they are desperate to fill. Think about Ariel singing, "What would I pay to spend a day warm on the sand," or Quasimodo's "Taste a morning out there like ordinary man," and the warmth and desperation simultaneously in those lyrics. And I think this is a major reason behind why Golden is so popular that no one, again, is talking about. Because Golden is something that we can feel both mentally and physically. We all have our own ideas of what part of your world or out there mean to us. And the same can be said about Golden. Maybe Golden is the perfect summer that you spent with your friends, when you first learned how to drive and you could all pile in the car and you had the top down and you could feel that sense of freedom. Maybe Golden is feeling the spotlight hit you when you go on stage, and not just any stage, when you are the lead in the musical for the first time. It's how the physical sensation of Golden not only hits you, but manifests from the inside, as cheesy as that sounds. This is a song about finally being able to shine without fear, but it wouldn't be as impactful if we didn't define what the fear is. And we didn't know what was preventing Rumi from shining right now. And if Golden wasn't enough, her song with Jinyu reinforces again, makes you feel what it would be like for them, and by extension for us, the audience, to be free. Like I said before, we do not care that the world is saved at the end of the movie. It's that for Rumi's dream to come true, the world must be saved. Saving the world is not a motivation, it is a goal. This story is about how saving the world is a necessary step on the path to seeing Rumi's dreams come true. And if you have been caring too much with us for a while now, you may have noticed that I buried the lead with one of my earlier quotes. It doesn't just end at enjoy their successes. It says, often it is followed by tears at the beauty of the victory, which leaves a warm glow in their hearts forever. That is what every Disney movie needs in order to succeed. Warmth. Warmth in personality, in relationships, and in story construction. They say that every film that has been successful, not just in the short term, but the long term, have been carefully built around that potential for warmth in the basic concept. And we see this in everything. The lighting, the environments, the outfits even between hero and villain, the music, and of course, in the characters themselves. You cannot have this brilliant light and the warmth that it provides without darkness. Without the nightmare, you can't have characters who dream. Audiences do not want princesses who are perfect. We want heroes who dream of the way the world could be, despite the nightmare that it is. And it makes us hope that maybe, just maybe, if we could have a fraction of their courage, their bravery, their warmth, that we could have our happy ending too. And that's what makes us care. And so this has been Calxiyn caring way too much, and I hope now you care too. Now this may be the root of the issue, but there are actually 5 5 reasons why Disney's I Want songs and their protagonists are flopping. So if you like this video, you'll want to check that one out, or you can check out this video about Disney's production pipeline compared to K-pop Demon Hunters, and how, suffice it to say, it is a total shit show. And I will see you guys next time. Bye!